Hello there, everybody. Welcome back to Star Wars Lads for this week's live Q&A. Hopefully you're all having a great Tuesday so far. We're going to talk about some of the latest stories in the world of Star Wars news, and then, of course, take your guys' questions throughout the majority of the show. So make sure you're sending in your questions, your comments, anything you'd like to discuss into the chat. Make sure you like the video. If you haven't, really helps out our channel. More people are watching right now than have liked. So make sure you do like the video. It really does help us out. Subscribe for more content just like this. We've had a lot of stuff coming out recently about Star Wars Visions. If you're interested in Star Wars Visions, we had a full review and ranking of all the episodes that came out yesterday. And then we also had our reaction initially to the 3 sequel episodes. We're also going to be talking about Visions today, giving you guys kind of a final wrap up here discussion with all of you. If you've watched Visions, let us know in the chat so we can all discuss some of our favorite episodes and least favorite episodes of season 3. Other than that, there's not too much in the world of Star Wars news. We do have the rumor currently that Starfighter is going to be wrapping up shooting in the UK in December, which is big news because it hasn't really been shooting that long. So I would imagine there's still more to come, but they're wrapping up their shoot in the UK specifically. We also have some other news and rumors that we'll discuss, but this is going to be a show that's most likely dominated by your guys' questions and your comments. So make sure you're sending them into the chat. Chats are first come, first serve. As always, you can send in a super chat, helps out the channel, really supports us, and we appreciate that. Or you can join our Patreon or YouTube membership programs. For the $5 tier, you get priority chat access for all of these streams. So then you can just get your YouTube handle to us on Patreon, and we can add you as a priority member, or you just become a member here and it automatically gives you priority chat access. So you can do that as well. Again, make sure you're liking the video. If you haven't, it really does help us out. And if you are watching on replay, make sure you comment. Let us know what you thought of this stream. All right, let's get into that first topic. And it's our main topic here today, that Starfighter is rumored to be wrapping up its UK filming in December. That would mark about 3 months of shooting, a little over 3 months of shooting in UK. Makes sense if that is specifically where they're wrapping up. It is a pretty short shoot, honestly, for a movie of this size compared to usual, but Starfighter is supposed to be a little bit lower budgeted than the traditional episode 7, 8, 9 Star Wars movie. So maybe they are keeping things tight and they are shooting on a pretty abbreviated schedule. But yeah, it is fairly big news if it's true. If it's not, which again, this is just a rumor, but if it is true, I really do like it because it means that this project was clean. It means it went exactly as planned. There weren't really any hiccups, and they were able to get everything done on time, which is always a huge plus, especially in the world of scoops today, where we see so many projects delayed for different reasons or things aren't going right on set. This is great to hear. If it is indeed wrapping in December, everything must have gone pretty smoothly because they are making a really efficient production out of this whole thing, and they have some big stars, so to keep it on track is really important. But Sonic, what are your thoughts on Starfighter possibly wrapping shooting in December, and do you think that rumor is accurate?
I think it is accurate. I think Shawn Levy's worked on some rather long shoots already with like Stranger Things and stuff, but for the most part, he is a quite economical director. I don't think anybody is saying he's an auteur, but he's somebody who gets his projects completed, gets them finished, and always on budget, never really has any problems with studios. He's perfect in that sense for Lucasfilm. Like, if this is supposed to be the true return to films, obviously we have Mando and Grogu this year, but that's a converted season 4 or part of a season 4, right? If this is how they're gonna like get us back into it, uh, yeah, you kind of want to go for a big vision. I understand that, but you also, if you have a choice, really want to make sure it comes in on time, on budget, and has plenty of space to grow, right, while still being a very solid product. And he's always kind of done that. He's he's not like a flashy director for a lot of people, but as someone who's been watching Stranger Things from the start, seeing how he's kind of transitioned from Night in the Museum into a more of a producer role and then a producer turned director again, and just like the level that he's been working with. Because again, Stranger Things is not a standard streaming show. It is kind of the reason why we've gotten so many of these like TV shows that feel like 3 4 hour movies and all that. It really exploded the medium and that sort of specific format, that binge format that Netflix had perfected in the late 2010s. And the budget that they have on that show is insane. So I think he's not coming at this with like, "Oh, I've only worked on traditional TV. I've only worked on like a couple movies in 2000s." He's been still doing stuff. He did like Free Guy. Obviously, he did Deadpool and Wolverine. Only thing I really hope for is that they're doing this quickly because they really wanna spend a lot of time on post-production. They really wanna make sure that we don't have the same issues with, like, Deadpool and Wolverine where it was a bit tight and on its post-production, and you can really tell because it is a very, unfortunately, drab-looking movie in a lot of parts, and I think if you're gonna throw us into this post-sequel era, it should be beautiful, it should be colorful, and I mean, with the code name like Kyber, Mist, and Kit Bash, I'm hoping that also speaks a little bit to, hey, this is stuff related to the Force and maybe like with crystals or maybe in the Darksiders. And then kit bashing, I'm really hopeful for. I mean, Star Wars has always been a kit bashing franchise. Like so many of the models and stuff are obviously from old fighter planes and stuff like that, all the guns and everything. But I'd love for this to be a chance to get like, really some really interesting designs. Like if we're not going to necessarily have the world building for like an evolution of like getting more past like E-wings and stuff that we're barely starting to see in the New Republic, I'm hoping that we get to see like, oh, all these different like citizen states and all these different solar systems throughout the galaxy in this very fragmented galaxy after episode 9. They're taking every little piece they can get, and I'm hoping that means that they're going to spend a lot of time on these practical models. They're going to spend a lot of time on their, hopefully, what a film called Starfighter, a lot of these really interesting space battles, how it can be different from the traditional naval battles that we've seen throughout the Skywalker saga films and throughout Rogue One and everything. So I'm looking forward to it. I think it makes sense. I'm hoping it's also because they want to spend some time on reshoots and see what works in post and what doesn't. He's somebody I trust to do that, but based on how well Stranger Things has turned out so far, 4 for 4 for me, hopefully 5 for 5. And I like Deadpool and Wolverine. I think he really showed a capability of getting into like some of the more emotional beats of characters as opposed to just pure action and comedy. I think he managed to show that in Stranger Things, but for most people with Deadpool and Wolverine. So excited. I think this is for the best. With the rumors with like Mia Goth being possibly like a character that they want to follow through with like a TV show and something, maybe they are kind of like trying to work on that next. Like, hey, like make this as smooth and efficient as possible, reshoots as needed. Like maybe he's already trying to like lay the groundwork and already has laid the groundwork, seen what worked in filmmaking, seen what can be like maybe cut out and put into like a TV show. Doesn't feel like it necessarily fits into the runtime of a movie. And yeah, it'll be very interesting. I think he's somebody who isn't just one and done in Star Wars. I think with this, hopefully being a good film with like all the positive vibes with such a strong cast too. I'm hoping this will be hopefully the best film that he's ever made, and it means that we get to see him transition more into a quasi James Gunn lane where he is someone that is trusted with the franchise, with the characters, with the stories being adapted, with ideas that are in play, and but also someone who's constantly just trying to chip away at stuff instead of waiting and putting breaks. Like if we're not going to necessarily get these 3 year event gaps that we had for the prequels and the original trilogy, then at least have somebody who is specifically working in the narrative film lane and have a couple people specifically working TV shows. We can't just let Filoni and Favreau jump around. We've already seen how strained they were just kind of splitting off their TV shows in such a rush time. So I'd like for him to be somebody with that level experience in both film and TV to have a chance to like say like, hey, I got this in. I'm gonna hand off the reins to my team for that's needed for post production, and I'm already ready to go on whatever's the next era for Disney Plus when it comes to the Star Wars franchise.
Yeah, I think those are good points. And I think Star Wars is looking for that type of person. It's looking for somebody to stick around and help kind of, especially on the theatrical side, push and market and help build something for them. I don't think I think James Gunn's an interesting example. Obviously, he won't become the studio head of Lucasfilm, or we don't think he will. Shawn Levy, but somebody who could just be around and help kind of guide that vision for what they're going to do, especially post Rise of Skywalker, where they're still trying to find their footing. And so I think it would be really great if he stuck around and did more than one film, or kind of just became an architect of his specific lane. I mean, something we've talked about a lot on the channel. I've been very pro having these people who are very much so involved in kind of the vision of an entire plan. I mean, again, Star Wars and planning is something we talk about a lot because it has been very much so kind of hit and miss whether we fully plan things or not with this franchise over the course of the last 15 years. But when it comes to a specific era, especially when you really got to get right, because it's up for debate right now whether people actually are interested post Rise of Skywalker, whether this is the type of move, whether you go back to the sequel characters, all that type of stuff. You do have to hit. And so if you have somebody who sticks around and is passionate about the material, passionate about what he's helped create, he's not just a hired gun, he's somebody who can actually be a part of what you are creating here. I think that's all for the better, assuming that Starfighter is really good. If it's not, then you can move on. But if it's really good or great, then I think they are probably desperately searching for people who are willing to commit to them long term, willing to commit to more than one film, willing to commit to help them oversee an entire kind of saga here. And we use Marvel as an example a lot because it's the one who's done it the most successfully. But Marvel, when they were in their peak, making phase 1 through 3, they used a lot of the same filmmakers and a lot of the same people to help craft each kind of era, and almost each phase kind of had a new voice that would take over and a new voice that would dominate that phase with their specific style. You could say John Favreau for phase 1, you could say maybe Joss Whedon for phase 2, and I think you obviously could say the Russo brothers for phase 3. And so it really evolved and changed, and when they had a little bit less direction, when they had newer filmmakers, or a new variety and a large variety of people coming in for phase 4, 5, 6, it hasn't had that clear direction. So I think Star Wars is desperately seeking those people who will commit. If Sean Levy's willing and this is a great movie, then I don't think it's a bad thing. So the complete efficiency of this production is definitely a notch on his resume of somebody who you can rely on and somebody who you can trust to get the most out of the money you're giving them and get the most out of the talent you're giving them. So I think this is a big story if it is true. We'll see, and we'll continue to track that as it unfolds and we get official word that it is wrapping in December, because we are still a month away as we just started November. Let's move on to our second topic, which is going to be Visions Volume 3. So we did again post a review out yesterday of every episode. It was in a ranking format. So you could go check out our thoughts there on each individual episode. But I think just as a quick wrap up, because Visions is the biggest thing that's happened in the world of Star Wars in the last week since we last talked to you all last week, let's just do a quick little wrap up of our thoughts overall on Visions. A couple of our favorite episodes, maybe not full spoilers in case people have not seen it yet, but some of our favorite episodes, overall thoughts on the season, and just kind of where we maybe think Visions should go and will go here in the future as we look forward to possibly a season 4 or any other types of spin-off shows like the Ninth Jedi that's coming. So I'll pass it over to you first, Sonic. Reiterate for the people watching right now what your thoughts were on Star Wars Visions. Should they check it out if they haven't? And give us some of your favorite episodes of the season.
Yeah, I think if you've already seen Star Wars Visions, you'll find this probably the most consistent volume that we've gotten for sure. I think the ground was raised again by simply having a lot of sequels, 3 sequels to be exact from Vision Season 1 or Volume 1, right? And I think all of them were pretty good. I don't think they all necessarily reached the same level as their predecessors, their prequels, right? But it was still some good stuff. I would say for me personally, Wasn't biggest fan of the Duel, but I found Duel Payback to be a really nice strong setup for a possible Visions Present series in the vein of the Night Jedi series that's gonna come out. Um, Not necessarily the same feelings for The Village Bride, and I think you kinda have to watch it and you'll see it's not very much like a world expanding short. It's more of like a let's wrap up a lot of stuff, and it's good, but it's definitely different than The Village Bride and a lot of stuff that we both really enjoyed and found surprising about it. But yeah, I think everything was good, even like the 3D CGI short, like, even though I had some issues with some of that stuff, it wasn't necessarily ever about the animation. I thought the animation throughout the season was top notch. Even the styles that like I was really hyped for volume 1, seeing what would happen there and being very disappointed, like a Tatooine Rhapsody, I'd find very surprising with Yoko's Treasure, how much I actually had a lot of good time and enjoyment out of it. So if there were things about like season 1 stylistically that you didn't like, I think give it a chance. I think narratively, every single one of these episodes is pretty strong. If you look at our review, even like you'll find our rankings to be quite different because I think Liam and I just found this to be a very strong season overall. It was like there were things that we really liked, some things that felt like pure visions that like felt like, hey, like this is exactly what this format should be for. Some that maybe didn't line up with our individual interests in Star Wars the same way, but still really, really fun overall. Um, I enjoyed it quite a bit. I would say my favorite has to be Black still. I haven't watched it since we've done our review, but that is a short that I would recommend sharing with anybody if they've at least seen one Star Wars movie, or at least one episode Star Wars movie. Just be like, hey, remember those stormtroopers? Would you like an interesting insight on them? Right. And that's all you gotta tell them. They won't be ready for what's about to happen. Because frankly, I wasn't either, despite looking into it, despite the marketing. It's just a pure vision into what Star Wars can be, a pure vision of a very specific thing in Star Wars, and then just exploding it out onto the screen. Fantastic stuff there. Um, yeah, I mean, I had a great time with this season. I don't know if there's necessarily plans for a volume 4, but if there is, I love it. I think they're maybe like now pushing more towards got a couple of these like Visions Present series based on like how people are gonna like react and watch and rewatch some of these episodes. But like for example, I thought The Smugglers, I really enjoyed that a lot, and that one just seems like really primed for like, and it seemed like very Night Jedi from Volume 1 in the sense of like it's trying to create its world, it's trying to like shoot its shot for a series. And I think a lot of these episodes definitely did do that a little bit more consistently than we ever saw in Volume 1 or 2. So yeah, I mean, there's a good chance we'll get a series. I think The Duel is definitely primed with Payback to get its own series. I think that's probably next up. But if we don't get a volume 4, hopefully we get a couple of these spinoffs, and then I don't know. I don't want Visions to go per se. I'm enjoying it a lot more than I did, after volume 2 where I was like, "Yeah, maybe there's like a couple more gasps left." Now I'm like, "Oh, maybe they've still got it. Maybe they just sometimes the quality can be hit or miss. That's the nature of everything being a bunch of different short films from different studios, not just in Japan but around the world." But yeah, I'm hoping that we get to see maybe kind of rectifying a little bit the weaknesses of volume 2 and see a little bit more interesting visions, maybe return to some of those studios and see what they can bring new or like sequel wise. And just like how I felt about volume 1 being really strong highs but like really really low lows, I think season 3 corrected a lot of that, and it's definitely worth at least one watch through.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. I think if you're not a fan of what Visions has done in the past, I don't think this will win you over. But if you are somebody who enjoys shorts, if you're somebody who enjoys alternate takes on Star Wars, like in the Infinities realm, I think this is the overall best collection of shorts that they've had. I think outside of Black, to me, these aren't the best ones overall that they've made, but as a whole, as a season, I think this is the best season. I do think something like Screecher's Reach is better than most of the episodes in this collection. I do think that even The Elder, the first Ninth Jedi, the Village Bride, even the original Duel are better than most of the episodes in this collection. But I think when you watch this specific collection, you get a much meatier set of episodes. They're all in the 18 to 25-minute range. And that's, to me, a big improvement over what season one especially did. Because a lot of the stories in season one to me felt rushed. They felt like They were trying to cram a lot into a little package. You see that a lot with especially studios who work on TV. It's hard to tell a short form story. It's hard to go from TV to film. It's very hard to go from TV to a short film. So if you felt that a lot in season one, here I thought everything was much better paced outside of maybe one episode to me. So I found pretty much everything here a lot more satisfying. If you're somebody who's looking for alternate takes on Star Wars, I don't think it gets too much better than what we've gotten here, at least from the actual film and TV we have gotten in the past. So I really did enjoy season three of Visions. Black is my favorite episode. I've now watched it twice and really enjoyed it even more the second time. Felt like I got even more understanding from it. So really did appreciate that. But outside of that episode, there's still a lot of really cool styles, really interesting takes, different stories, things that feel both like EU inspired, original trilogy inspired, prequels trilogy inspired. So definitely check out Visions if you haven't. I know a lot of people have slept on Visions. Visions seems to have it's kind of a weird space. Like I'm interested to see where Ninth Jedi goes with Star Wars. And I know Disney actually just put out their first like collab anime with forgot what it's called, but they're doing one that's like a villains themed anime that's on Disney Plus now that you can check out as well. It dropped, I think, the same day as Visions. But it feels like Visions hasn't quite crossed over into either realm. Like some episodes have, some people are really into it, but it's like Vision. I still feel like most Star Wars fans have not watched Visions, and also most anime fans haven't watched Visions. It's kind of this like weird nebulous area. Yes, it may have won some people over to each side, each medium, but I don't think it's fully gotten the amount of people that they had hoped. I think season one kind of did, but since then, Disney Plus has had such a drop off, and streaming in general has had such a drop off that I don't know if season three is going to have the devoted fan base that season one originally did. So I'm interested to see where Star Wars and anime go from here because Ninth Jedi, I think, could be something that becomes must see if it's great. Star Wars fans are devoted to animation in general. And so I think a full animated series that actually is really great. And if we do end up finding out that it actually is canon, which I think is a huge deal, because I do think a lot of people still haven't watched Visions because they're like, well, it doesn't really matter for the Star Wars story, so I'm not going to check it out. I do think if we find out if Ninth Jedi is canon, even if it takes place, 1,000 years after Rise of Skywalker, I do think people will check it out more than likely. And hopefully, if they do, then Visions kind of has a second life because I do think even season two, which I thought was a step down from season one and three, all of them have worthwhile stories and interesting, unique story and perspectives to share. And so I love and appreciate Visions. I really do hope we get a season four. I think it at this point is one of the most underrated pieces of Star Wars now. It just does not seem like people are talking about it nearly as much as I expected. Not really sure what the impact over in Japan is, and so if that's their end game, if they're trying to get Japanese audiences to watch Star Wars, not Western audiences to watch anime, then maybe it's a big success. But it just, from the United States perspective, does not feel like the conversation around Visions is great enough to warrant more. But we'll see. I really do hope they get a season four because I love these small drops. I've said it multiple times on our streams. I just think Disney Plus adds value to the average Star Wars fan by just giving us 2 to 3 small drops per year on top of our main content. And so with Visions it's another thing. You don't even have to use your animators. You license it out. They make products that can be really anything. It doesn't have to be something that's specifically in the Star Wars timeline. It doesn't have to be something you have to put a lot of creative oversight on. You kind of just let them run wild. And I think this is the type of stuff that in the long run, as you try to bolster content, this is the type of stuff that gets, the fans who are subscribed to Disney Plus staying for maybe one extra month to check it out. But it's not going to win over, the new subs. You still have to do that with great TV, which they are trying to figure out as well. But we'll see. Hopefully, we can get more visions here in the future. But those are our main topics. So again, we're going to switch over to the chat for the majority of the stream remaining. So make sure you're sending in your chats into the chat room. Again, it's first come, first serve. But if you are somebody who wants to support the channel via super chat, we will guarantee to answer your question tonight. You can also join our Patreon or YouTube membership programs where you can subscribe and get priority chat access as well over there. Make sure you like the stream if you haven't. Right now, there are more people watching than have liked the stream, so make sure you do so and subscribe for more content just like this. All right, let's scroll up to the top. Critical Thinker 066 says, thoughts on Tinian's Batman run? I thought the Joker War was fun, but subsequent arcs got less interesting with the boring magistrate stuff and wasn't a fan of all the new random OCs. I didn't read it. I still haven't caught up on most modern stuff. So I'll let you know eventually if I do get to it. But I was disappointed to hear that sentiment kind of shared by almost everybody, especially coming off of his detective run and how good that was. Hearing that the transition over to the Batman title wasn't as good was disappointing. That's kind of when I was falling off buying the paperbacks every few months, was just because I was not a huge fan of the way King's run wrapped up. And then I was excited for Tinian to take over uh, the Batman run, and then heard that his stuff wasn't that great, so never bought it. But I will check it out at some point. I am still on a mission to catch up with Modern Batman because that was the one series I was fully caught up on at one point, and then everything just fell by the wayside. But yeah, thanks for sharing that opinion. Batiside the Manslayer says, hey guys, good to see you. I'm building my Blu-ray collection very slowly. So far, I just have some anime because I don't need it to be 4K, etc. I recently completed all the sets of Inuyasha, and I have Death Note, which I am rewatching, by the way, the box set of the Clone Wars, The Last Airbender, etc. But recently, I also got Digimon The Last Evolution Kazuna, which is a movie. Have you seen it? It's truly fantastic. I have not seen it. I haven't watched Digimon since I was like probably like 6 or 7, when it was on Kids WB with Pokemon and all the other anime that were like Saturday morning cartoon pitched. So I kind of know nothing about Digimon. I used to know a little bit about it early in the day when it was considered, like a B tier rival to Pokemon at that point. And I was a huge fan of Pokemon growing up. So I wanted to, watch any other show that was kind of similar to that. But I have not watched anything new from it. And I haven't really watched the series at all since those early days, probably back like 2002, 3, 4, around there. So yeah, I have not seen that, but I'll definitely put it on the list. And if you have other recommendations, Batsai, for Digimon, like where to get started with it, I am interested in checking out the series. So leave those in the chat as well. I'd be definitely appreciative of that.
Yeah, I haven't actually watched a lot of Digimon. I was always more of a Pokemon kid, but I did hear about this movie. Yeah, I think it's like the conclusion of the original anime. So, and I think they did another one that's like a conclusion for Digimon Adventure 2. Um, yeah, I mean, it was always like that thing that like everyone would tell me Digimon does way cooler things. It's more interesting about like what they're trying to do with the characters and their creatures. But I don't know, I watched, like, the Pokemon manga not manga, Pokemon anime when it was coming out, read a little bit of the manga, but mostly I mean, I was all in on Pokemon for a long time until somewhere yeah, between 5th and 6th, it started really fading for me. Try to I never I bought all the games up to, um, what is it called? Up to the Switch generation. I am planning on one day catching up, buy, like, a Switch Lite to play all the Switch games, and then invest in a Switch 2 for, the Switch 2 games onwards. I know Pokemon Legends ZA has gotten some pretty good reviews, some mixed reviews about certain things. It seems like the Pokemon Legends series is where they're taking more risks. I've always heard Digimon is always like a very progressive, like, let's try to keep on changing what do you expect about this franchise without it necessarily being about the merchandise, like a Yu-Gi-Oh could be, for example, with like 5Ds. That was a series I was like, as a 9-year-old, I was like, "Yeah, that's so cool." As like a 14-year-old, I'm like, "Wait, so why are they, like, playing Yu-Gi-Oh cards and then NASCARing it basically for, like, the whole series," right? So, I've always had appreciation for Digimon, always, like, always being the underdog next to Pokemon, but I did hear about this. I think it came out during COVID. It didn't get a lot of much fanfare at first, and then all the pop culture outlets and everybody were like, "This is insane. This is, like, really good." And I've heard, like, Toei Animation in general has just been really nice about a lot of the conclusions for a lot of the older, series and all that, so, yeah, I mean, if I get a chance to, I will definitely check it out. Maybe just watch a recap and then watch the movie or something. Maybe that'll one day push me to watch a little bit more of the original series or something. Well, I'm not sure, but I've heard really good things about it, actually. I just didn't recognize the name at first and looked it up. I'm like, "Oh, yeah, yeah, I heard some really great things about it," so maybe one day.
It's cool you're building out your collection though, for sure. Like I think that's a really good start. I mean, obviously, you got a lot of big series in your collection. I did a full Blu-ray collection of my own too on my other channel. If you haven't checked out my video there, posted it like I guess almost 2 years ago now. But yeah, I'm a big fan of having a physical media collection, so I think that's really really cool. But yeah, Death Note is a cool one to add as well. I've seen Death Note. I've not seen Inuyasha, but I've heard great things about that. Obviously, the Clone Wars, awesome. Last Airbender. So you got a good collection going on. Hopefully, you can find more stuff to add to your collection. Then Batasai says, in the Star Wars camp, you know my stance around Star Wars publishing. Great creative space, but for me, the meat has to be on the screen. In that sense, I'm kind of worried that some really good stuff has been told in comics. I'm specifically thinking about Kylo Ren, Ben Solo today. I saw some encounter with FG Luke or Rise of Kylo Ren, Darth Vader, Dark Lord of the Sith, Shadow of the Sith novel, etc. Do you think those stories could still be adapted on screen despite to be already told in publishing? I know it is possible as anything, but I mean, likely to happen. I don't want to be mean to publishing because I've read that stuff too and I enjoy it, but I truly believe Star Wars essential storytelling needs to happen on the screen as live action or animation, and those stories are kind of a big deal to leave them just as comics and novels like Dark Disciple, etc. Well, first of all, I don't think really anything in canon has been done that I could label as truly essential and not adaptable in another medium. So I think your fears can be kind of assuaged there. It's not like Legends that it told like, every aspect of these characters' lives for 30 plus years after Return of the Jedi. And that's ultimately why they decided to go with an alternate take because they couldn't really tell any stories that were significant without adapting Legends with 7, 8, and 9. But when it comes to Rise of Kylo Ren, I think that's the one that's the closest. Again, though, with that story, it's very incomplete. It's Kylo's perspective, basically. You don't really get any Luke perspective. You don't really get anybody else's perspective. So you could still tell the same story from Luke's perspective and, add more to it. We've also seen the canon has now officially been like willing to just completely retcon comics, especially with the K2SO Cassian comic now being fully retconned for Andor season 2, and then we had Bad Batch basically retcon Kanan's first couple issues of his comic. So they are willing to do that. So I don't think you have to worry in that like they're not going to say, "Oh no, this book told this story. We're not going to do it, or we're not going to do it in a different way." On the screen. They've already proven that that's what they're willing to do. And I think that's their philosophy moving forward. Canon was a nice idea. We all liked the idea at the time of trying to keep track of all this stuff. But in the end, it was never going to be feasible as you continue to tell more and more stories. Books have a lot of throwaway lines or throwaway sentences to pad runtime that, don't necessarily end up having to be letter of the law, right? So I don't think you have to be too concerned about them not doing stuff. As for adapting these things, We've talked about that before. I mean, I would love to see adaptations. I don't think you'll see any live action film adaptations of pretty much anything in Star Wars canon books. I just don't think the stories are important enough to really warrant that. When it comes to animation, I would love it if they did that. Even if it is like, yeah, the book is the if you want to go like the old school route of saying like the book is the true to timeline version, but the movie's kind of an encapsulation of the book, and it brings to life the spirit, but it doesn't necessarily use every single detail. If you want to do that, which is kind of the approach they took to a lot of later Legends stuff with like Force Awakens or Force Unleashed adaptations into books from the video game, with other video game novelizations, with like the Clone Wars movie and the Clone Wars novelization. There was a lot of stuff they did that they were like, okay, this version is the real version, but the other take adds some to it. But if we can retcon it if we want, I'm down for them to do that. But I don't think we have really any shot of them anytime soon doing that. I do think that Legends is more likely to be the thing that's adapted into a animated film series more so than canon, because they can just kind of bill it as like, here's the Legends books brought to life type of thing, versus canon. I don't know if too many titles would sell, the hype that if you announced an Heir to the Empire animated movie adaptation, you would get from that, right? If they were in 2027 Star Wars Celebration, like you're asking in the next question, and they announced, yeah, we're going to start a Legends adaptation series, and they're not retconning anything, they're not part of canon, but we're going to make animated movies in the vein of Legends and adapt Legends books. I think you'd get insane hype for that. If you announce, hey, we're making an animated adaptation of uh, Shadow of the Sith, I don't think you get as much hype because just less people are familiar with it. So that would be my answer. I don't think you have to worry about publishing too much. As much as I love publishing, and I know that you guys are having a whole debate in the comments after, and I haven't read all your guys' points yet between Critical Thinker and Badasai. But as much as I love publishing and would love publishing to have important storytelling that doesn't get contradicted by movies and TV, it's just not realistic in the Disney world, because Disney is a film first company, it's a TV first company, it's not a book first company, and so in this era, we're not going to see too many stories like that unless they fully decide to say, hey, we're not going to do anything with certain characters because the actors are dead, or because we just don't think that story fits. So I really don't think you have to worry about that too much in today's context.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I will say I think Liam has covered it pretty extensively, but what I would add is, yeah, we've already seen like the TV shows, animation, and already showing a tendency to like want to touch on a lot of these stories and at least give like a good summary, right? Like the best version of it is what we saw, I think, in Tales of the Underworld, where we see Asajj's perspective, right? If you read Dark Disciple, right, you'll be like, okay, I've seen the whole story about why she died, right? What she sacrificed for Quinlan and everything on Christosis, right, against Dooku. If you watch the first couple of minutes, right, like, she's dead, and you get to see, like, oh, when Obi-Wan and Quinlan, like, "Can you hear that? Can you hear the voices, like, of her return to her sisters?" What I liked about it is, like, yes, she kinda does, but she's also, like, screaming and yelling, and she's like, "Wait, no, no, don't go, I'm not ready for this. Like, I need to go still be with him, need to help him," right? And it doesn't contradict that story per se, right? It gives almost, like, her perspective. It lets them have some closure still, lets you still value that book while still giving you, like, "Hey, this is, like, what happened to Side, she died, and if we show when she hopefully shows up again in another show or something like that, like a limited series, we'll flesh it out, we'll give you a little bit more glimpses of what happened in Dark Disciple." I'm liking that strategy where they can grab parts of the stuff of the stories that are essential for us to know and then move forward. I know Marvel has been really bad about it recently in a lot of times, and, for, like, not now per se, but, like, a couple years back when they were trying to first blend in their live action TV shows into their movie content. But even then, right, even in the bad movies, they do summarize at least, like, with, like, some exposition with one character saying, like, "This is what happened in the show," moving forward. This is status quo, right? Star Wars doesn't really have that limitation. It doesn't have to all stick onto like one timeline and all that. It has so many different mediums that it plays into that all we have to do is really just piece out some interesting things and take something unique about it and give you a reason to get that adaptation and the original source material. I think that's fine. A full adaptation is going to be hard. Like Liam said, I don't think there's anything that's so essential. Like the most essential Luke story right now is still not what I would call an essential Luke story. It's an essential look at what he was like before Ben's fall, right? But it's not like essential to all the 30 years that happened between the Return of the Jedi and the Force Awakens, right? So not have you don't have to be worried there. I think the only thing you really have to be worried about is them adapting something so thoroughly different, like we saw with the Kanan comics first couple issues and how it was played out in Bad Batch. I think that's so far been isolated to Filoni. I'm hoping that he limits that because I think it'd be silly to say that they don't at least look or hear what people are saying about stuff like that, right? Even if he wants to be very George Lucasian and where he gets to like write over the stuff, at the end of the day, George Lucas is George Lucas. He is the creator, right, of Star Wars. He was the head. He was the artistic head, the creative head, while he was still handling the business. Filoni is not all of that, right? He's not in the George Lucas position because that can never really be replicated. And I think with some of the feedback that he's gotten with, how Ahsoka season one was, how he needs to make improvements for season two, much like he did for the Clone Wars season one and Rebels season one. I think he'll get more into that lane of just working on the storylines that he's handling. But I don't think we'll start to see him necessarily continuing to do like a lot of what we saw with Kanan and how it was adapted there. But if there are some big stories in the future that people really love, right, that feel like, oh, this is so essential, I wouldn't be surprised if we see like if like a book, for example, if there's a couple of chapters of a character, if that isn't like adapted and leading into a bigger story, right? Like if that's like their entrance into the larger narrative. I think we can still see stuff like that. But full on adaptations, I think that's hard. I think we have possibilities for seeing Crystal Crisis finally be adapted at some point, especially with this little bit more push to like limited series, even for animation that seems to be happening with like the possibility of the Path series with Asajj and Quinlan happening instead of like a whole all encompassing Clone Wars esque Clone Wars sized show with multiple different arcs, multiple different perspectives and stuff and jumping all around. I don't know if Disney really wants to be doing that, unfortunately, but I think they are willing to at least do like a season or two for with that animation and adapt certain things like that. So I think we can see Crystal Crisis happen and maybe even fleshed out a little bit. I think we have a chance for Dark Disciple. Hell, they might even just make it like movies, like almost like feature presentations that like Liam and I were saying it'd be nice to just get these little kind of quality drops like hey, like it's not the biggest thing, it's not going to get a lot of promotion, but it's like a cool thing that we can do then like add into and pad up all the bigger stuff that's going to be dropped throughout the year, right? I think we can see that with Dark Disciple. I think we see that with Crystal Crisis. I think we can see that with Son of Dathomir. I think Clone Wars is always going to be a special case because they committed so hard to the Clone Wars legacy stuff and then they deleted quite literally that page from the website and all the animatics to then adapt it through Clone Wars season 7 through the books and all that stuff, right? So I don't think it's a no per se, but I think that's always going to have the strongest possibility of getting full adaptations because of the uniqueness of the situation. Anything purely Disney onwards, it's going to be a little harder. But again, if you can get a couple scenes from books, from comics, and give a slightly different perspective on what happened without overriding it, I think that is the way that Disney's going to kind of handle that stuff.
Yeah, I think so too. And to summarize kind of the debate that was going on in the comments here between Critical Thinker and Batasai as well on the topic. Critical Thinkers arguing that we do want to see, big interconnected stories, that Star Wars doesn't have to tell its most important stories only on screen. It can tell important stories in publishing. And you know my thoughts on that, Critical Thinker. I'm with you. I really want, as a big oh god, sorry. Um as a big fan of books, I want much more interconnected, big, epic storytelling in books. I want a reason to read these books outside of it's just the next Star Wars release and I have a Star Wars YouTube channel and I got to read it. I want to be able to to talk about something exciting. There was a lot of hype around the beginning of the High Republic. I do think the High Republic, it never really fell off in terms of quality, but it fell off in terms of pace and excitement, and it lasted a little too long. It took too much time to wrap up a story, and it didn't have a story that warranted waiting 4 years to find out what happened. And I think with Star Wars publishing, they need to find that perfect marriage of planning out an initiative that they can wrap up in a couple years that prolongs your interest, but also gets you excited to read each phase. Because after phase one ended and they jumped to phase two, I do think they bit off a little more than they could chew. It really killed the momentum. As good as phase two stories were, people just weren't as interested in starting another story right in the middle of the story they were already reading. Right. So I think they'll find their footing there. I think the High Republic was a good first experimentation. It was a good first idea. They will find their footing and do more. But I where I agree with Batasai is, in an ideal world, I would prefer all those stories on the big screen for sure. I would prefer any big epic Star Wars story on the big screen, two books. I'm a movie guy. I would always prefer that. But I think there's room for both. I think the one thing that Legends does great is, even though originally it was fully carried by Han, Luke, and Leia, eventually, even though Han, Luke, and Leia are still, you know, leads or co-leads of almost everything that's written post Return of the Jedi, eventually they had built up enough original characters, Mara Jade, the Solo family, Ben Skywalker. They had built up enough original characters that you could read a book, and the thing you were excited to find out about was what's going to happen to Jason Solo. I mean, they did a whole a whole series about Jason Solo. They haven't done that in canon. They haven't built up to any original characters really outside of the High Republic that you are fascinated to learn more about. And so I do think they need to figure out a way to do both. The frustrating thing is that it just feels like they have no plans for more stuff with the characters we all know and love, and yet they're refusing to let publishing do anything with them. So that's ultimately what they need to figure out. I mean, every year you wait, Mark Hamill and Harrison Ford, who are the only two of the big three still alive, get older and older. Harrison Ford's in his mid 80s. Uh, Mark Hamill is getting closer and closer to 80. We don't have much room for more stories with them, unfortunately. So at some point, you're going to either have to rip off the recast band-aid, or you're going to have to rip off the animation band-aid and just do it in animation, or you're going to have to say, hey, we actually can't tell stories with these characters. We don't want to do recast. We don't want to do animation. We don't want to do CGI. We'll do it in books finally. I mean, I think there would be a huge influx of Star Wars readers if you did that. But again, they have to pick one or the other. So I'm with you both, and I think you both are kind of on the same page. I mean, I would assume that critical thinker, you also would prefer to see all major Star Wars stories told on the big screen or in TV, if as long as it's good. But I'm also with you that realistically, that's not likely going to happen. So if if we're going to not recast, which is basically the only way we get these stories unless they do animation, then at some point they have to give it to the books. And as much as I love the books, and canon has had a lot of really good books so far, we've talked about that in the past too. They just don't have the weight that Legends did, because Legends told stories with our main characters. And so it's an interesting perspective and it's interesting future. But I do think at some point they'll have to figure that out. I mean, they've waited too long. At this point, if they were going to tell stories with Mark Hamill specifically, I don't think Harrison Ford's really coming back outside of the occasional cameo. But if they were going to tell stories with Mark Hamill, I think they've just about waited too long. I think he's got, you know, probably a few more years of interest in this before he gets to the point where he's like, I'm 80 years old. I don't really want to do this anymore. I mean, at times you already hear him say stuff like that. So they're gonna have to pick what they want to do. It is just frustrating that they seem to just still continually ignore that topic and not really want to address it. But it kind of goes hand in hand with what Batasai's next question is. which is Star Wars Celebration 2027 is the 50th anniversary of Star Wars. What shocking announcements do you think we could expect? Ben Solo back in the movies, 10, 11, and 12, Sam Jackson back. What announcement can live up to the importance of the occasion? Well, I think the Ben Solo one is a big one. Um, I think especially because 2027 celebration will be predominantly a celebration hyping up Starfighter, because Starfighter will be coming out a month after celebration ends. And so I'm fully expecting Starfighter to be the big king of the show. They will show clips. They will be talking about the movie. They will have all the actors there. It's in LA, so there's no excuse to not get all the people there, right? It's going to be big for Starfighter. And what better way to kind of say, hey, Starfighter isn't just the beginning of this story. We also have episode 10, 11, and 12 coming. We've got the Ben Solo movie coming back. Here's Adam Driver. Here's Steven Soderbergh. Everybody's back. I think those are all very likely to happen. I would give the Adam Driver thing a good 55 to 60% chance right now, and I wouldn't be shocked if it goes up continually as we get closer and closer to 27 Star Wars Celebration. I think 10, 11, and 12 I'd also give at least a 50% chance to happen. I think it's something that's going to happen at some point. They know, especially by then, they will have known how much their first Star Wars movie post episode 9 will make, post COVID will make, that's not titled with a number. Right now they're 50%. They're 1 out of 2 in terms of profitable Star Wars movies that don't have an episode number. Rogue One was a huge hit, a shocking hit for them. I think they hoped for like a $700 million movie for that, and they got a $1 billion movie. Solo was a bomb, mostly because of how much they spent on it, but it still would have been disappointing considering at that point they had 3 straight $1 billion Star Wars movies and ended up, making 4 out of $5 billion Star Wars movies. So Solo kind of sticks out as that failure. So they'll know with the Mandalorian and Grogu what they've got. If the Mandalorian and Grogu just bombs, if it's like a $200 million international movie, which would be a huge bomb because that would mean probably at least 50% of that, if not more, came from the US. If it's something like that, $200-300 million, you're definitely getting an episode 10 announcement. You're definitely, because I think they will start to slightly panic and be like, the only reason people will come see these movies is if we number them. So you'll get the episode 10 announcement. You'll get the Adam Driver. You'll get them to cater a little bit more to what the fans are saying, because they will kind of panic and want to do something that they may know will get their money back. If Mandalorian Grogu is a huge success, I think the other announcement will be continued, Mandalorian Grogu, Mandalorian Universe announcements. You'll get, a Thrawn or / Ahsoka movie, Heir to the Empire, and I think that's the like hidden one. That could be the secret announcement. Like, yeah, we're doing Heir to the Empire, and we are recasting. That would be, I think, the big, huge shock surprise announcement. Uh, Outside of that, I do think as much as it is a celebration and as much as you want to, come in guns a blazing, part of me still hopes they don't announce 50 million things, because like we've already been there. We've seen them announce stuff that never happens. I would rather them announce things that they're sure about. I would rather them talk about what they have in the works. I'd be much more excited to learn about things they're actually about to start shooting, like Starfighter this year, than to hear them come out and be like, yeah, we've got the Darth Plagueis movie coming, and it's directed by Denis Villeneuve, but we don't have a script or a writer or anything yet. I would be that would be like a huge gut punch again. So I don't think they can mess up their momentum with that. Bring back Sam Jackson though. I want to see more of Sam Jackson. It doesn't have to be even post Mace Windu dying. It could be anywhere in the timeline. I'd love to see a Shatterpoint adaptation.
I disagree. I want him dead. I like him dead, and I very much enjoy Samuel L. Jackson every year being like, "Bring me back." and him not getting his wish. It's a little fun thing I like that he has with the fandom and with the franchise so far. And he's old. He is old. He's up there with Harrison. I think he's older than Harrison, I believe, or maybe
Oh
just a
no,
little
no way.
younger. Yeah, I don't know. They're both old now. I mean, I saw what's Martin Freeman, not Martin Freeman, Morgan Freeman, um, on the Hudson show, like the little walkway thing that they do. And for a guy who's looked old his whole life, he finally looked old, and I was like, "Oh, wow," like, sheesh, like, these guys are not getting younger. So, I don't know, it'll be very interesting. If there's anything I'd rather see from an old character, it would just to finally get that Lando movie off the ground and at least have Billy D. Williams give us, like, him narrating it and, like, a couple of shots to him sitting on the Falcon or around the new rebellion remnants and stuff, Republic remnants and whatever like that. That's what I'd like to see from an older actor. I just like, personally, Mace Windu being dead. I don't know how much we'd really see from Disney willing to put, like, money to make him play a character as he was in his, late 2000s era, right? Early 2000s era look, like, that's a lot of money to de-age him, and I know they've done it before. It's not like they don't have assets. I'll give him that. He is one of the few actors they have, like, a proper 3D scan. They can de-age him, and his de-aging in Captain Marvel is still fantastic, but I don't know if you can necessarily de-age an old man's walking gait. Like, he's gonna have a lot of body doubles if they're gonna pull it off, pre, Episode 5, pre-2005 Samuel L. Jackson, but again, I'm also just a Mace Windu hater, despite me enjoying his, Shatterpoint a good amount, and then I also liked, the new Mace Windu book that come out this year. I like him as a character, don't get me wrong, but I think it's he fits for me the epitome of, like, the hubris of and the dogma of the Jedi, so I like him being concluded, but I also love seeing everybody clamor for him, and I like his enthusiasm, I can't deny that, but, yeah, as far as Celebration goes, yeah, it's gonna be Starfighter's year, like, you have to, like, anything that's gonna be coming out or had just come out usually dominates Celebration, so I'd love to see Gosling, Mia Goth, the whole cast, because it's a stacked cast. You see Amy Adams and you see all these people on stage, it's hard not to be excited, right? I know Amy Adams hasn't had a very good run ever since she starred in Man of Steel. Her career's kinda gone sideways after having such a critically acclaimed, era for herself up to that point. Um, I know she had a couple of things like, Nocturnal Animals or, some shows and stuff that have been pretty good for her, but nothing like big movie-wise for her, unfortunately. So this will be huge for her. Aaron Pure, I mean, Lanterns will have been out. Hopefully, that's really good, and his number is just rising in the industry. It's gonna be interesting seeing where Mia Goth lands. She's got Frankenstein coming out here. She's been on a really strong upward climb as a whole as an actress in the industry. Yeah, there's gonna be big names, and then Gosling. I mean, he is a star, so obviously I'd love to see that whole panel, see if there's some surprises, see if we see that kid that's Noah Flynn, if he's in any movies or something before him to like get him like a little bit of momentum too. Disney, I'll give a lot of credit for um, the sequel era stars. They all kind of got a couple small projects. Besides, I think maybe Daisy Ridley that definitely Disney has some influence on, like, I know Boyega had the 24 series, a limited series that came out, where he was, like, a pretty central character to that, just to get them, like, a little bit more exposure. I don't know if Disney's willing to spend, like, 600, $700 million for a film in every possible way like they did for The Force Awakens. That's a whole different time. That's a whole restart of Star Wars in a lot of people's eyes. But I'd love to see them, like, almost influence other studios, influence other, Disney related productions to be like, hey, give them a little bit of a run here. Like get them back in familiar. So by the time they go to Celebration, like the hype for them is like really, really churning. And we've seen some good glimpses of Starfighter at that point. And then we start hearing about the clips that they might show and stuff like that. So I think it'll be huge on Starfighter. But at the end of the day, it's also the 50th anniversary of Star Wars. This is a huge milestone. Not many franchises are still thriving the way Star Wars is 50 years later, right? I know, people probably in the comments will be like, "Oh no, like it's diminished and all that." But Star Wars has always had periods of being diminished. I mean, I don't think the current era that we're in, it's not great as a Star Wars YouTuber, I'll say that, but I don't think it would worse than, the late 80s till up to the Heir to the Empire, right? After Ewoks ended, after Droids ended, basically nothing, right? Maybe some RPG books, stuff like that. But then once Heir to the Empire came out, an explosion, right? But that dead period, I don't think we'll ever see that with Star Wars again. Hopefully not, especially with how much money Disney can pump out compared to an independent Lucasfilm under George Lucas. But yeah, I mean, 50 years on, that's a huge landmark to celebrate. I think what we're going to see, especially with some of the leaks that have started coming out, I think they're going to finally release the unaltered original trilogy. There's been rumors, and I think we've talked about it on stream before, but there's rumors not of only like getting restorations from those original prints, but getting the whole trilogy in theaters. Like it will be the closest thing for a lot of us to see like the special editions back in the 90s, right? This will be better than that. This is will be, hey, like take what you saw in 77, 80, 83, clean it up, correct the imagery. Like I still think some of that stuff has to be fixed, and they've already started making it with like their latest 4K scan in the steelbooks that got released. Like Return of the Jedi, there's a lot of blurry shots, and they finally fixed that even like the 2011 complete saga never bothered to fix, right? I was happy to see Disney do that, but with them having original prints preserved and getting to put that in theaters, yeah, I would not be surprised if we see like for 2 weeks you get to see the original Star Wars. For 2 weeks you get to see Empire originally with its color grading being very different on hot, not as blue, and then seeing Return of the Jedi, which has so much of its colors and its blacks crushed on Endor. A lot of its like frame issues around everything that happens in the Battle of Endor. I think we're gonna see a fantastic remake here, or not a remake, like a refurbishing of it, and letting us see what it was like to experience these films back in the day, but in the cleanest possible version with the corrections as minimal as possible while preserving those effects. So I think that's going to be a huge thing. I think what they'll be saying is like, yeah, we're releasing it this year, but then the surprise will be like, but we're also releasing it in theaters, guys. So like, stay tuned for that. This is going to be a fantastic time to not only be able to collect it physically finally and in that cleanest version, right? The closest thing we got to that was like the 2006 DVD releases that people were like, I remember seeing the covers for it. The DVD covers of the original trilogy are so burned in my mind along with the prequels. And it was like, oh, what is this? And you're like, oh, it's not just like a widescreen or standard version. It's the original prints, and people who own them, they're like, yeah, they're not very good. They're pretty bad. Like there's a lot of poor quality issues with Empire specifically, and finally getting to have a physical copy from Disney after George was like, no, never again. I'm never gonna let anybody collect that. All right, it's gonna be a nice thing. That's the biggest thing I think since 2013 that people have been clamoring for. So to finally get it will be awesome. But to get it also in theaters that just purely celebrate that trilogy, yeah, I think that's going to be a huge thing that's going to be announced. And it's not going to be like, oh, just this film. It's going to be the whole trilogy in theaters, and that's going to blow people's minds. I think the 10 to 12 is a possibility. I don't know if I'd say 50%. I would say closer to like 30% because in my mind, even if you don't like, the sequels, even if you don't like the prequels, the one thing I do appreciate about them is that they at least have a generation gap. I think by the time we get to 2027, we're not quite a generation removed from, or like a generation and a half removed from where we are at the end of The Rise of Skywalker. I think that might be something to save a little bit later. But I think they could maybe announce, like, hey, we are working towards it. And if that's a great way to hype up 10 to 12 without actually committing to anything specifically yet. And then they'll be like, and the reason why we're not committing to a date is because we're actually trying to build out this post Rise of Skywalker timeline. And then bam, we get to see, you know, Ben Solo himself, Adam Driver walk on stage. Hunt for Ben Solo is still like trending so hard. I think this is probably trending harder than even like the Battlefront 3, that we trends and the movement that was happening earlier in the year. Like this has serious firepower. Everybody's like giving little teases. Like Charles Soule was talking about like, oh man, this version of the characterization of Ben Solo. Like I'm thinking so hard about this in a very different way than the comics. Like people are like they're not just like teasing for teasing's sake. I think something is happening, and I do suspect a lot of it has to do with Rey's New Jedi Order probably being connected to that film before it got canceled officially, right? So something's happening. I think the chance of seeing Adam Driver on stage is now approaching closer to like 60%, 70%, just with the way that the momentum has stayed pretty consistent. Although I don't think we're going to get a hunt for Ben Solo anymore. I think we're going to get the Rey's New Jedi Order, the hunt for Ben Solo, maybe like a mini trilogy or like a combined film for the 2 of them as the co-leads. I think that'll be really interesting to see. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's what Daisy Ridley is reintroduced for, and it's like, "Hey, I know I was here in 23, but actually I'm doing this with Adam," right? Like that I think that'd be really cool if she, like, was like, "I'm part of a dyad. There's always a second person in this." And then you see Adam Driver walk out. I think that's the best way to, like, connect to, like, what the movement's been like and how that's been going. So I think there's a very strong chance for that, and I think it's honestly growing the more and more I see it online. I'm hearing people offline, like in person, to ask me like, "What do you think about this?" I'm like, "How do you know that? I know you don't follow Star Wars online. Like, where did you hear that?" So it's permeated like actual people's lives in a way that I don't think the Battlefront 3 movement quite did. So pretty great to see that. But yeah, I think they do announce 10, 11, 12, and they're like, "Hey, we started with Starfighter. We've got whatever happens between Rey's New Jedi Order, Hunt for Ben Solo, and then maybe we could see a Boyega appear, and we see him get a film, and Oscar Isaac, or maybe a combined film of them, right? I think they're gonna start saying like, we are doing 10 to 12, but we're gonna build these landmarks, getting to these different points, like 10, 15 years down the road, and then once we flesh out that era, that's gonna happen. And I think they have to. Like, that's the only way in my mind that if you can say like the closing point for this era of the post Rise of Skywalker era is the fact that 10, 11, 12 is happening. You keep people motivated to watch a lot of these spin-off one-off films that are happening that don't have to be super connected, don't have to necessarily have like Avengers level like meetups and stuff, but are like nice little landmarks, nice little check marks leading into 10, 11, 12. That you're like, yeah, maybe it's not essential you guys watch all this, but if some of these characters appear, it'd be better to know what happened with them in the years after episode 9, right? Like, I think that's maybe a way they not only support these films that are going to be coming up, but also like tell people like, hey, episode 9 is not the end. Like, we heard what people were saying, and we're going to make sure that's not the true end, and we're going to actually develop, our filmmakers like we have with streaming. We're gonna bring in more auteurs and stuff like that. Let them have their shots with these like one-off films, and then once we're ready, 10, 11, 12 happens. I think that's a good chance, but committing to like a 10, 11, 12, announcing it, I think it's gonna just be like how it was when we heard about like the titles of 7, 8, and 9. Let's just be like a StarWars.com article or something. Outside of that, what could happen in 2027? I mean, timeline-wise, that does line up with, the 4-year gap between Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor, so Jedi 3, I think, could be pretty dominant. I think that's like a 80 to 90% lock. I think that should happen for sure. I know that EA's been purchased by the Saudis and a couple other people, so this will be already in progress. It won't really be affected by that deal, and I think that will let this be like a big final conclusion. I would love if they not only say like Jedi 3 is the end of Cal Kestis' story in games, and then they announce like Cal Kestis is gonna show up in whatever TV show or movie that's gonna be happening, right? I'd love to see Cameron Monaghan get a chance to really get to play that character. I'd love to see Marin's actress as well get to play Marin in live action if they both survive, obviously through Jedi 3. I think there's a chance of that sort of happening for sure. At least Cal Kestis. I don't think he's gonna die. I think Marin has a chance of dying. But regardless, very, very interested, very hyped. And if it happens in 2027, right, with how Mandalorian Grogu could possibly get a sequel and everything, that does line up pretty nicely for these characters to not be too much older and then show up in like an Heir to the Empire adaptation, like Liam was saying. Like, that's a Jedi that you can kind of plop in without having like a who is this guy? Like, plenty of people will be like, that's Cal Kestis from the Jedi games. So I think that'll be really cool to see. A couple game announcements, a couple other things like that, but I think it'll be mostly Starfighter, and mostly, uh, the original trilogy restorations and everything. Anything book related, if it does happen, like, let's say, like, we're talking about the original trilogy actors, like, if they're not recasted, but you still need to flesh out what's happening in their 30-year gap, I think the closest thing that we're gonna get to them is, like, saying, like, we're gonna have a massive, massive marketing push, like, more than we've ever seen for any Star Wars book, because it'll be like, "These are the essential stories for these characters." Alright, that's not something that the EU had to deal with because it was all really book focused, but if they do commit to, like, saying, like, "Hey, we're never gonna really do any recasts, we're gonna just use old footage at most," then you really have to be like, "Hey, if it's gonna happen in the books, make this, like, the biggest Star Wars book like push that you've ever seen in history." Like, that's the only way I see the publishing side actually get a win like that, where they get such a significant story for these characters.
Yeah, I think they'll do something for publishing. I think they'll announce whatever the next High Republic is. Just they have to do something exciting, and by then we already kind of know what's coming out next year from publishing, or at least the first half. Basically, the only date that they always release something that hasn't been announced is the end of the year, like October, November time. This year it was a November book. Most years it's October, so we're basically only missing one book from next year's timeline. Funny enough, there's the sequel book next year, of course, with the legacy book, and then we have the tie into Outlaws. Uh, that's kind of it. Not really the most exciting year for books next year, so maybe 27 will have to be a rebound year. It does seem like they're kind of restructuring, reshuffling post High Republic. I do think animation could be the big wild card for 27. Like I think we'll see next year what Darth Maul is, but I don't think that's their permanent show. Like I think that's a Bad Batch esque show, a 1 to 2, maybe 3 season show. I don't think it's something that they want to be their big one. So I think if you wanted to cover every era, that would be the perfect place to announce an original trilogy themed series or an original trilogy film that takes place after Return of the Jedi, and it has Han, Luke, and Leia, and it's animated. And they're bringing back Mark Hamill and Harrison Ford to do voice roles. And I think that would be a wild card for sure. I think they would announce something like that. And I do think in the video game side, they're going to have to really go all in. Video games have been really hit and miss with Star Wars. We know we're getting Zero Company next year, and it's a big swing because it's a very different genre than they've really ever tackled, but it's not the type of game that's going to make them a lot of money. It just might get them a little bit more prestige in the world of Star Wars gaming. So I think Jedi 3 is absolutely going to happen around then. I would imagine it's probably back to the Jedi Fallen Order holiday time, October, November drop. So November 27, I think, would be the target date for a Jedi 3, unless we get a surprise announcement later this year or early next year, because usually by the time you actually get an announcement for a video game, usually there's at least an 8 month to 12-month wait in between the announcement and the game, but usually it's a 2 or 3 year wait. So I'm expecting that. And I think Battlefront 3 is a high likelihood. I do. I think at that point, 2027, at that point, we'll be looking to move on to another generation of consoles. You'll be looking at a possibly PS6, and then whatever Xbox decides to do, which is probably not make another console or probably just make some type of digital only console that they can maybe try to undercut the market and make something for cheap that can be the affordable option to PlayStation. I feel like that's the direction they're going to go. Whatever happens then, you probably will get a PS6. Could Battlefront be like, yeah, we're coming in 2028, 28, 29, and we're going to be a launch game for PS6? I think that's a likelihood too. I do think Battlefront will happen at some point. It'll be too long in between games. If you want to count the PSP games, we will have never waited longer for Battlefront if you don't get one until 2027 to 2028. So that's kind of a shock with how long we were waiting for Battlefront originally, because it was 10 years in between Battlefront 2 and Battlefront 2015, but we had two PSP exclusive Battlefronts in the meantime. And this time we're going to get none for 10 years. So I think that's significant enough to where they can announce that. I agree with you with the restorations. That's definitely happening. And they've already announced they're putting A New Hope in theaters. But I think they should do all three. I mean, I think they should do, honestly, I would love the idea of like one of the 9 movies almost every month, and just pick a date and do one each month. And re-releases right now are doing so well. It's crazy how well re-releases are doing, especially if they're limited time only. I think the only thing that hurts them this time is that we just got Return of the Jedi, we just got Phantom Menace, we just got Revenge of the Sith. So maybe it hurts attendance just because people have it's not the novelty of seeing it in the theaters for the first time in a while is kind of worn off. But the other three, Attack of the Clones, A New Hope, The Empire Strikes Back, not that many people saw Empire Strikes Back in 2020 because
Yeah.
theaters were shut down. So I do think those three carry some weight. Most likely it'll just be the OT. but we'll see. But yeah, I do think they're going to try to deliver something on every level. I think with film, hopefully they don't overpromise. I think another wild card one I want to throw out there, just because I personally do think something is going to happen with Ewan McGregor at some point. I do think they're going to do more Obi-Wan. It's just a matter of whether it's a season 2 of Obi-Wan, whether it's a different show, maybe something that's a little closer to the book or something we're expecting from the Obi-Wan show originally when it got announced. Or it could be a because these guys want to work together all the time, like a Clone Wars type movie with Obi-Wan and Anakin. As much as they don't necessarily look like their Clone Wars aged versions, I still think it would be a lot of fun to do that. So, definitely, I think that's a wild card thing that you could throw out that would be prequel trilogy kind of celebratory, because I think you're going to look to celebrate all ages or all eras. And currently, as much as the support around Adam Driver coming back has been there, I do think you need some type of big announcement that goes more in line with the OT and less in line with the sequels, just because it's a celebration of Star Wars. So I think we need something. Nothing will. I mean, they're not going to announce like, oh, we're bringing Mark Hamill back for a movie where he's going to be the star. Like that's not going to happen. But it would be cool if they did announce something that he was involved with, or something that um, was an original trilogy type of story. So we will see. But that's a great question. We'll probably speculate more and more about that over the next 2 years. But thanks for asking that one. Continuing with the questions here, we got Batasai asked one more. Says, I heard somewhere the dark saber will be back for Mandalorian and Grogu. What do you think the story of that will be? It was kind of disappointing when they broke it in season 3 and just with bare hands. Yeah, I would say everything around the dark saber was disappointing in season 3, giving it back to Bo-Katan. Just yeah, it did not live up to the hype of what they set it up for in season 2, and it did not really live up to what we knew of it in the Clone Wars and Rebels. Um, as for bringing it back, I mean, fixing it will be pretty simple. they, we've already seen them do that. I don't think really anybody will question it if they just have it and it's there. Really, the question will be like, well, why, if they fixed it, is it not with Bo-Katan? Is it and it is with the Mandalorian? I think that's something. I mean, that can be solved with like one scene of Bo-Katan being like, "Hey, you're going on this mission. Here, take the dark saber. I never really needed it anyways. Uh, you're the one who should have it." Like I don't know. It could be solved with that type of thing, or a line where Din Djarin's like, "Yeah, Bo-Katan gave this to me for my missions hunting down the Empire. Like it still needs the vengeance of the Mandalorians," or something like that. I think it'll probably be explained like that. I'd love to see it back. I'd love to see it in action. It's such a cool thing to see in action. But yeah, at this point, I feel like most of the significance around the dark saber is kind of just gone. They need to. And I would imagine they don't really bring it back. I think they just use it as a cool weapon from now on, which is kind of what it originally was. And then they added some meaning to it later in the Clone Wars as Maul started to take over and all that. But yeah, can't wait to see it back if that is true.
Yeah, I don't know if the dark saber itself is back. I'd be very interested to see like the kyber itself, if it, like maybe taken away from the destroyed Cassis, or if it's somehow been survived. Um, yeah, that's I haven't heard anything about it, to be honest. I wasn't super pleased with like the handoff. I thought Bo-Katan using it was actually really cool. Like the way she like rescued Din. She chose a mastery that I think is, show could have been played out in more of a contrast. Like someone who's super well abled but has failed with the dark saber versus someone who is struggling with the dark saber but seemingly is like the one who's ready for the like most fit for the mantle as Mandalore, right? That could have been something super interesting. Season 3 just doesn't do that, unfortunately. But if you like rebuild it again, I think you kind of have faced a lot of the same criticisms that we have of like, hey, why does Ray have the Skywalker saber refixed by the Rise of Skywalker, right? Like, if people were already critical of that, I don't know how they're going to be, more willing this time around with the dark saber. Like, yeah, willing in the sense of like maybe do it better the second time, but I don't know if you should undermine it. I think it's better for these Mandalorians. as a whole not to have the dark saber at this point. Like they they had a great like non-violent culture under Bo-Katan's sister Satine for quite a while, right? They were independent. They got to still have a lot of traditional Mandalorian values without everybody being clad in armors and like fighting their whole life, right? And seeking war and bloodshed. Like I'm not saying that happens. I don't think Bo-Katan is any way gonna try to take back what her sister did, but I would be more surprised if she, like, doesn't at least try to say, like, I didn't have to agree with my sister, but I think there was some structural things that she did with her society that's healthier than living in biospheres because our whole planet's bombed and glassed over and over by ourselves and then by the Empire, right? So I don't see the dark saber really coming back per se. I think it's gonna be more if it'd be very interesting if, like, you'd see some very interesting things with Kyber itself, how, like, that concept changes. Kyber is something that kinda naturally grows, and it's not really presented in the same way as, like, crystals per se. It's almost like its own living thing. And I'd be very interested if, like, the dark saber that's crushed and destroyed under Moff Gideon's like whole workstation, right? His whole secret base almost starts growing and sprouting, right? It'd be very interesting to see if the return of the crystal itself is also like part of the healing process of the planet. I'd love to see that. I'd love to see the dark saber concluded, but the dark saber's legacy still very much affecting and shaping the planet in a different way. Having it be like, hey, we're gonna build another version of the saber, and I don't know. I don't love that. I think if anything, it might be more of like a misread kind of rumor that maybe they're trying to do something with Tar Vizsla, right? Maybe we're gonna see some really cool like Mandalorian stuff that's gonna happen during the Old Republic era. Maybe in the KOTOR game, he's a character, right, or something. If they're trying to make it canon, right, instead of just the pure remake, like there's potential for it coming back. I just don't see it so immediately after season 3, right? That was one thing that, like, everybody was like, "Okay, that happened, like, I wanted to be better," but I don't think people are clamoring to see it again because who takes it? It's gonna still be Bo-Katan's at the end of the day, right? I don't want her to get it back for a 4th time and then lose it, right? I'd rather it just be like, it's part of Mandalore now. It has its very interesting effect on it through the Force, through its unique crystalline structure or something that like glasses over that old imperial base and like not like a crystal tree, but like something that becomes like a landmark for Mandalore. I'd rather have it like that and like a place of respect, a place of like holy worship for them, as opposed to like just another cool thing that has to be reborn in Star Wars instead of like allowed to lay dormant. You can do wonderful stories without necessarily the thing coming back the exact same way. I think that's the one thing I don't really love about like a lot of these characters kind of coming back and all that. Like, where's the justification other than you just want to make more stories, more money? If you can still continue their legacies in wonderful ways, and Star Wars has done that in the past, it just seems like more recently Disney's been like, this character can come back, this character can come back. Having a dark saber come back, I think now we're just like anything now really is truly undead.
Yeah, and I'm kind of with that. And like story wise, I don't think it really needs to be in this movie, but I do feel like because they are, I feel like completely resetting to the end of season one almost with the vibes, with the style, with everything. I think it's something that they feel not just with marketing and like selling toys and all that, but in general, I think is iconic enough that and cool enough to for set pieces that they will probably bring it back and they can just explain away with like a line or something. But yeah, ideally for the lore that they've already kind of messed up, but for the lore, just leave it gone, move on. Make Mando find his own new cool weapon. That would be nice. Batasai says and explains how to watch Digimon. I won't read everything, but appreciate the explanation. Thank you. And then also says uh, that he was more of a Pokemon fan and watched Digimon here and there, but it was worth catching up with the rest of the show and the series and all the movies. Definitely interested because I've, you know, it's it's adjacent to so many other things that I like, and as a big Pokemon fan now, then for basically my whole life, as a fan of that franchise, Digimon's been, adjacent to that as well as so many other anime series and other video games and other things that I've liked my whole life. So anytime that there's something like that revolves around so many of the things I like, I always want to give it a shot because I'm sure I will like it. But there is a lot to catch up on. But thank you for that. Critical Thinker says another issue is that while books and comics have editorial mandates, and all movies and shows in the Disney era feel so much more corporate than the EU books or even some canon books did, I don't want to act like sci-fi books that editorial people still messed with are high art or anything, but somehow they felt more risky and interesting than Disney films and Disney Plus. Again, besides Rogue One and Andor, but that's another reason I just don't have the faith that Disney Plus films and shows can give us some kind of interesting big narrative that I personally will get interested in because they're pivoting so often and being so safe and bland that the authenticity and stuff like comics and novels or even the Clone Wars that makes big interconnected narratives work and what makes them so great and crazy and wild and able to go in any direction while telling the biggest, most insane story possible is just something I haven't seen Disney do, unless it's Andor, where Kathleen Kennedy had to fight for them to let Gilroy cook. And you're not wrong. You're really not wrong. And it's again, it goes back to the reason why most people always say if something's directly compared to a book or a comic book or whatever, and you have the film adaptation, that oh, it wasn't as good as the book. And it is just the limitations of film. It's budgetary limitations, it's mass market appeal, which you don't need to have in books as much. It's the marketing, and unfortunately, it's just the reality of the way it works. The marketing and toy aspect, all those different factors play in. Rewatchability, replayability, crowd access. Is it easy to watch or do you have to do homework? All those different things play into film in any type of film and TV product because they're so expensive to make. Whereas with the book, you're paying editors, you're paying a writer, you're paying people to print it, and that's it. With film, you're paying thousands of people to work on a movie, plus the really expensive actors, plus the really expensive executives, plus the really expensive uh, director and cinematographer and all that, plus prints, plus streaming and rights. There's just so many other revenues that cost so much money. They have to play it safe most of the time to try to get the most money back. They could go risky, and I think it would pay off for them if they tried, but we will see. So I don't disagree with you at all, critical thinker. I think you're absolutely right, and that's why it does feel when you read Legends a lot more exciting and a lot more interesting than most of the stuff we have seen out of canon in film, in TV, and all of that. Because again, there was nothing holding them back. I mean, George Lucas literally let them do anything they wanted because they had to do it with the caveat of like if he wanted to do something else, he was just going to erase it, and you're going to have to live with that. You'll have to come up with a reason why, but he didn't care. He did not care at all. So with canon, with Disney, they've tried to care. At this point, they don't seem to care, other than are the books selling? Are they worth us putting money into? Right? They care about that. At this point, they don't seem to care about how much they'll contradict, and we'll see over time. Like I think that's a burden that frees the books because again, like the books have felt so safe because they are just predicated on what stories Lucasfilm as a whole will let them tell. George Lucas basically his approach was like, you have an interesting story, let's do it. And if it gets overwritten, oh well. That was his approach. And I think Disney's getting closer to having that approach. I don't think they'll ever fully have that approach, considering they're trying to make a big multimedia franchise. They're trying to bring each person in and create that corporate synergy. But I think now that we have Andor and Bad Batch retconning moments from books and comics, now that we will continue to push further and further into the future, it's just an inevitability. And so, as long as you don't retcon entire stories and you just retcon moments, I think people can live with that. And I would be all for retcons in order to have books that were more interesting. And then I'd rather have the debate about which one's better than just not have books that are diving into that. So, I mean, you could do both. You don't have to make controversial books. uh, and you don't have to make those controversial decisions in the movies. It really should be that simple. But if if it is for some reason something so detrimental, you got to change it. Like the origin of K2SO and Cassian, I think that's something worth changing because those characters were film first characters. It was a one shot comic that barely anybody read, and it fit the story they were trying to tell in this beloved series. If it's like we want to change this tiny little detail that really didn't matter at all, doesn't matter at all for the movies, but we're just going to change it because we don't care about the books. That's the types of stuff that they should try to, not do. That's frustrating. Like the Bad Batch. The Bad Batch was just kind of one that was like, and nothing about it felt necessary with the Kanan comic. Um, but yeah, I am with you. Books always will feel more expansive. Comics will always feel more expansive, but that's just the nature of the mediums. And so I think there's a power and a weight to Star Wars on film because it's a film franchise, because it's a film first franchise. And so if you were able to tell those types of stories on film, if you're able to get them right, I would prefer to see them there. They haven't had the track record that's shown that they are able to do that, but I'm still of the opinion that I would like to see them there as opposed to in the books. But if they're not going to do them there, I want to see the books get those stories that instead of just not doing them in case maybe one day we might make a TV show about it.
Yeah, I have a lot of the same thoughts. I mean, I'm not saying we're at that position yet where it's like, oh, like they absolutely don't care about the canon. I think they still do, but it's just not the same level of respect that they, really presented it to be, when canon was restarted under Disney. Right now it's like a yeah, 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 for no, we're still committed. And then if they're not, they're not, right? They haven't really done anything so tragic. And like even the Andor one, right? If you I remember like when we were doing our streams and predictions videos, I went and back and reread it. It kind of technically is the most retconnable thing possible. I know Gilroy's like, ugh, I hated that they made that, so I was just gonna ignore it and they had to deal with it. But if you read it, it's like, military intelligence memo, super classified, right? It could very much just be in universe as like that's the cover story about how he met Cassian and K2SO met, and that's the reality. Like they don't want to like let us know that Cassian was at Gorman, that he's been working with this specific rebel leader that hasn't been well accepted, that like history forgets, history writes over with Mon Mothma, with Bail Organa and everything. Like it actually works so well with the themes of the story, with the implications of what Cassian's life is like as a rebel before he properly joins the rebel line. So I'm actually pretty cool with that, honestly. I think you can still read it and be like, yeah, there's like a very easy retcon here that's already built into the story well before it ever considered it could be a retcon, right? So not so worried about that. Fully agree with you on like the whole Dark Disciple, continuation. It's like, well, why is that happening? Okay, does that make sense? How is it going to be retcon? Is there really meaning for that? And then Bad Batch obviously messing up so much with Kanan comic when it just didn't have to. Like you could have honestly adapted just the ending of that. I think the lightsaber color being the different would have been minimal, but if you did it at nighttime or whatever, it would have worked just as well. Like it just is. It's so confusing. And I know Hidalgo recently has been tweeting about like these are all kind of myths. These are all kind of perspectives. There is a true canon that we know, but this is just how the different formats serialize it in different ways, different perspectives. And I'm like, all right, like yeah, that's cool and all. Like it is Star Wars. It is a mythology, but we're not like Tolkien where it's all under one guy and him like rewriting his story and his ideas for his stories. This is just it's always been to some degree a corporation based on merchandising that has tried to keep things kind of in line but hasn't succeeded. Admit that, like, that you didn't really take the huge steps to really make Lucasfilm Story Group that essential, especially after The Last Jedi, where they were such a prominent part of that process with Ryan Johnson, the way he talked about, like, I'd always work with them. We haven't really heard about any of the filmmakers, any of the TV workers, like, say, like, "Hey, yeah, no, we've been checking in with the Lucasfilm Story Group and making sure everything's lined up." That hasn't been the case since 2017. So, yeah, it's unfortunate, but big stories I think are gonna happen. I think in general right now we're at this whole like end of the first era of Disney Star Wars. Like we've reached the 10-year mark essentially from The Force Awakens. the real first big piece of medium for them, right? And we finished the High Republic, so we're done with the publishing side. We've seen how the Marvel run has looked like for multiple different series. Now there's a huge discussion about how like Marvel in general isn't even committing. I don't know if it's just for Star Wars, but in general, Marvel's not even committing to like these 25 issue series anymore. It's now they're like five, and then if it works, we'll continue. Like everything is in flux. And I know you make a lot of points about like DC and its different things like Final Crisis and everything being very different, very creative driven, but everything has changed post COVID, and Disney has changed quite a bit during COVID, and now they're like we made a lot of overcorrections trying to position streaming in central, right? The streaming era as symbolically is ending with Stranger Things 5. Like that is the only show that's ever worked truly in that 3 hour, 4 hour movie format over a season, right? We're already hearing about Disney showrunners now fully for the MCU shows, lowering their budget there. That's probably gonna happen with Star Wars too. Like, we're not gonna necessarily get an Andor budget series, but we're definitely gonna start getting more of these, like, continuously following characters for, like, 12 episodes or something. Like, that's all these things are already kinda happening. It's just when everything's under a huge studio, you can't just see it all happening at once, and I think publishing has taken the best foot forward and being like, "Yeah, these are the restrictions you put us under, but look what we achieved." Even with, like, some of the, like, mixed things about, like, too much interweaving between comics, junior books, adult novels, and everything with the High Republic, even if the misstep was going from phase 1 to phase 2. The High Republic is a resounding success. It is a huge proof of concept, and it turned out really well. It landed its story really well in Trials of the Jedi, and that's still one of our favorite books. It's a top 5 book in all of the High Republic. It's done quite well, and it's still gonna be continued. We're already hearing about, like, characters like Rupert Natani get c comic continuation where she's a bit older, young adult or an adult now, right? Like, these characters have succeeded in the fact that they're gonna continue. Like, they're not just gonna end here with the High Republic Initiative. We just might not see full-blown initiatives outside of that main story anymore. So, they have proof of concept, and I think we're gonna see publishing make a big change. Not 2026, obviously, but I think after 2027 onwards, I think we're gonna start seeing, like, the next big thing, like Liam said. I think that's for sure um, and I know you said you don't somehow just don't quite see it. I mean, honestly, if I'm being frank, we've read every single one, so we have seen it, right? You just like you've talked about Legacy of the Force, New Jedi Order, and all that, right? You've read all those in great detail, and you can talk about it, but we're talking about it from the perspective of actually consuming, quite literally, every single thing that came out of the High Republic, and it was a success. So I think it's never gonna be New Jedi Order level. Nothing in the EU actually ever matched New Jedi Order, but as far as, like, a multimedia publishing initiative, that is what can be the template moving forward. That is something you can learn from and improve. Again, I don't think the High Republic was perfect, but for us to care about original characters in a time period that isn't super consequential because there's no sit around and stuff like that, and for it to be that well received for all its years, like yeah, I think that's the way forward. We're gonna start seeing, like Liam said, 3 to 5 year initiatives. We're gonna start seeing TV shows with lower budget, but getting 3 or 4 seasons with 10 episodes, 12 episodes. We're gonna start seeing movies with one-offs and just more creative vision, continue developing filmmakers like we saw with streaming shows, but now with proper movie budgets. We are entering a new era. So publishing, yes, will always be something that has such an expansive grasp, but saying Disney is just choking it and it's not just a critique of, TV, streaming, and film under Disney. Like in general, I have to disagree with that critical thinker. I think everybody is going through a huge shift in every format and all these big IPs, all these big studios, everything is changing. But Disney is finally taking those real first steps to being like, we finished this first era. We have to look back at everything, and now we have to take a step forward. And they've shown signs that they actually are changing with their other franchises. So why would I say that Star Wars publishing is going to forever be stuck with these character novels that are really cool but are, never truly big stories? When I've already read The High Republic, when I've already seen the potential, when I've seen changes and everything else under Disney. So maybe a little strong for me there, but I just have to disagree when I think you've also admitted to never having fully read The High Republic.
Well, and again, I mean, the High Republic isn't the EU post Return of the Jedi. It
Of
isn't
course not.
that big. It isn't that expansive. It isn't that, boundary pushing, but it is the only example we have of canon so far that is a multimedia publishing initiative. that is an actual story that they've concocted over a multi-year span. So that's why it's used as an example. And like we've talked about many times before. It is the High Republic is more. It's more like an actual serialized version of the Clone Wars multimedia initiative than it really is anything from the post Return of the Jedi side of the EU, because it has, its tie-in shows and initiatives. It has comics, it has short stories. It's got everything where like New Jedi Order had the ebook novellas and that was it. And then, you know,
Invasion years
15 years
later,
later,
yeah.
yeah, 15 years later got Invasion. So and Legacy of the Force, Fate of the Jedi, those were structured, 9 book, 10 book series. Um, they didn't have tie-ins. So like it is hard to really compare High Republic to anything. And personally, uh, in our review post High Republic, like our retrospective when we were talking about it, I mean, I think for the next one, I'd prefer if they don't tie into
Yeah,
comics. Like I would love them just to stick to novels because that's when High Republic was at its worst. And not that the comics were bad, but it's just it got too bogged down in like waiting for different plot threads to come. Um, at some point, you can have too much of a good thing too, especially if you're reading everything, right? So like you're reading High Republic comics and you're like, well, it's frustrating that these aren't going anywhere, and the books are the only things that actually are going somewhere.
right.
Um, so there's a lot of frustrating things about High Republic, but I do think at some point they will learn from the lessons of the High Republic, and it was a pretty good start for a company that's never really, or for Star Wars that's never done something fully multimedia like this. They've only done short projects or things centered around
Shadows of the
like
Empire, stuff like that.
yeah, and Shadows of the Empire was centered around one book. And so it's
Yeah,
like you got the book, you got the comic, you got adaptations of that same story, and then you got alternate perspectives of that same story, but it wasn't an expansive initiative. And then with Clone Wars 2, like the books weren't serialized. They didn't follow each other. They were different aspects of the war. But you had the TV show as the backbone of the whole thing. You had the occasional video game that tied in, and you had the comics that tied in, which told a much more linear story than any of the books really ever did. So there's nothing really to compare High Republic directly to that Star Wars has done before. And so I think that while it's new ground and while it was ambitious, and I appreciated how ambitious it was, I do think pulling back and going the Legends route and just being books only is a way that you can deliver a little more satisfying story, because there are people like us who are reading everything, but the majority of the readers are just reading one or the other. And
yeah,
so
yeah.
it was a great idea to try to pull comic readers into books and book readers into comics, but it just didn't seem to necessarily flow as well, as I think they had hoped it would. But hopefully one day, they take the lessons and they learn and they grow and they change and they add some new stuff, and it gets to get better and better. We only have a few minutes left in our stream tonight, everybody. So make sure you send in your last couple questions, your last couple theories, comments, whatever you'd like to discuss. Send it into the chat. Super chat automatically gets answered tonight. It really helps us out and supports our channel. If you are Patreon or YouTube membership program members, you can also get priority chat access. So make sure you check out those tiers if you're not a member already. Next up, I believe it was Batasayu says, I would like to make a special edition of Revenge of the Sith with the deleted scenes of the Rebellion arc, Luke lamenting Han's death. Are you talking about in Last Jedi for that one? And then what would you like to add in your special edition and which scenes? I would love to see the Revenge of the Sith special edition too. I think it would be cool. I mean, more like director's cut. Like I don't want them to say, "Oh, this version is now the official canon version of the movie," like the special editions did. But I would love to see director's cuts. We don't necessarily need it because they're already there for deleted scenes. So if you want to watch those scenes, you can watch them deleted scenes. More so, I would love to see like things that never made the deleted scenes, even like final or extended fight sequences with Order 66. Like that's something I've always wanted to see and heard about. And like Lucas has talked about his like 4.5 hour cut of Revenge of the Sith that had the early like Order 66 montages of Anakin fighting Jedi and stuff like that. Like that's the thing I've always wanted to see the most. Ever since 2005, I wanted to see that. Um, that and then also, maybe extended versions or a better version of the Palpatine Mace Windu Jedi Masters fight that also were out there and didn't we didn't get to actually see. I think that would be my number one special edition changes for Revenge of the Sith. Last Jedi, I agree that scene is really good, and I don't know why they cut it, especially for a 2.5 hour movie. I don't know why they cut that specific scene. There's a lot of scenes. Most, to be honest, most of the Last Jedi deleted scenes, I'm glad they cut. That was the one that I didn't really understand why they got rid of that one. I'm trying to think of Return of the Jedi. There are a few that would be cool. I think the Moff Jerjerrod stuff with Vader would be neat to add it back in. I like not seeing, as cool as it is to see Luke build his lightsaber. I like not knowing that until he gets it
Right.
during the
Yeah.
Sarlacc pit fight. I think that works better for like the shock and awe of the green lightsaber. Now at this point, everybody knows, so it's not as surprising. but uh, but yeah, I think that's a cool moment. I can't really think of too many other ones. Attack of the Clones has some fun deleted scenes, and I think some ones that add a lot to the Padme and Anakin relationship. There's also a lot of stuff that is just world building for the Separatist movement and Count Dooku. A lot of cool deleted scenes for Count Dooku. Phantom Menace, I can't really think of any. So I would go with mostly Revenge of the Sith. I think the Revenge of the Sith one is the one that's like that whole arc with Order 66, especially after playing it in the game, as a kid. That was something I always wanted to see done. So if we got to see that would be my top deleted scene for sure to get. And I do think Revenge of the Sith would be the one that would just be like, if they actually came out with a director's cut of Revenge of the Sith, which they won't, but like if they did, that would be the one that everybody would be super hyped up to see.
I think for Revenge of the Sith, obviously the Rebellion stuff, I'd love to see remastered and at least released that way, even if they're not going to put it into a director's cut or a special edition. Because man, Padme is such an important character, and then just make her be like, "I'm pregnant," and crying for like the majority of the film was just a shame. Because she's a leader, right? I mean, she's somebody who quite literally was like, I'm gonna do what's best for the Republic, and if it means that I have to go against it, yeah, for sure. Like it's so crazy seeing how much Mon Mothma and Bale have grown as characters. Obviously, I still would have loved Jimmy Smits to have reprised the role in Andor with how great some of the stuff is that Benjamin Bratt really gets to chew on. And I just don't think physically he's quite a match for me to like kind of work it around in my head, but it's still a fantastic performance, right? And it's so great seeing them. And they're two of the biggest parts of the Delegation 2000, and then the 3rd part, if arguably the biggest central figure of it, was Padme, and she's dead, right? And we get to see that played out in Mass Fear and, like, with effect of all that and their thoughts on Padme and all, and how, like, they're actually kinda not the best of friends, Mon Mothma and Bail, but, like, it was always Padme that would kinda balance them out, right? I wish we could have at least seen these scenes, and I hope there are some stuff that hasn't even been put on, like, the DVD specials, sec we haven't seen that if they do get released, like, wow, here's like a like more than just her, like, sitting around talking, like, here's her doing things, like, preparing stuff, right? Just it's just such a shame what they did with Padme. I think it makes sense for the runtime, don't get me wrong, but, eh, you're doing so much for Anakin, you're doing so much for Obi-Wan, just give a little bit to Padme, even if she's a diminished character, right, in the story. Uh, I do agree about a lot of the Order 66 stuff, like, I know it's a video game adaptation of Sindraling and Sarah Keto, but I hope like there was at least some Sindraling fight. I think there's always been rumors of him fighting him, and we see him with like two different Padawans instead in the Hollows. I wish we could have seen some of that because he's the sword master to the Jedi, and even the Clone Wars. Oh wait, like has him randomly in like one scene, but we never see him like fight. Like I wanted to see him fight, guys. Like, and I just have such good memories of the '05 game with him and his Jarkai wielding Sarah Keto apprentice, right? I think more than anything from Revenge of the Sith, though, I'd want to see more of the Invisible Hand because that 4.5 hour cut supposedly has like the first hour on the Invisible Hand, which is like correct me if I'm wrong, that's gotta be longer than the combination of, like, what we have with including space battles for, like, the Death Star 2 and Death Star. Like, that would've been insanely and it's not like the Invisible Hand's, like it's not like malevolence level or anything. It is just a flagship at the end of the day, but to have, like, an hour of that and seeing, like, them jumping into the sewers using, like, the little nose, stuff like that, like, seeing more of that humor, seeing if there were, like, scenes of them, like, as they're talking, going and fighting their way through sewage systems, electrical systems, and all that, right? There was also, like, them talking and hinting at other things that probably now is contradicted with, like, the character of Ahsoka being a real thing and Clone Wars as a show having not been fully finished in oh 05's oh 03, oh 05 version and including the oh 08 version, obviously. But yeah, I would have loved to see what Invisible Hand shenanigans were like. If it really took them an hour and they were being chased around, they get caught a little too easily, and it's played off for a joke. But I imagine it'd be like a different, a different take would have been used if we saw, like, an hour and it'd be a little like, "Damn, like, we did everything right, and we finally got caught up to, right? Like, we managed to avoid every detection." So, I'd love to see something like that. Obviously, for I've always been talking about it on the channel, a 3-hour cut of The Rise of Skywalker. I think we would have had at least another couple minutes of Leia as Carrie Fisher's Leia. I think we would have seen way more with Ben Solo. I think him actually being a character, like, talking would have been nice. I think we will see a lot more of what we're seeing with Luke as haunting Ben, everything going on. I would have seen and would have probably cheered for the Eye of the Webbish Bog, which is in the adaptation, but not in the movie itself, and they literally created the prop for it. For a trilogy that has leaned so much more in the fantastical side of the Force in Star Wars, just not having that was a bummer to me. I would have loved to seen some trippy Force Vision S sort of thing there for Kylo with the Eye of the Webbish Bog. It's such a cool design. It shouldn't work, but it really does for me. Just love that. Yeah, I think we were seeing a little bit more clearly about, like, this is Mustafar, and it's been healed, and this is why Kylo's here. We might have seen a little bit less of light speed skipping, even if that still exists. I think we still would have seen a couple extra scenes there. I think we would have seen, Finn use the Force more dramatically instead of, like, just a feeling, right? Stuff like that. I think we would have seen a lot of cool things there. It's more Sith Eternal for sure, but yeah, yeah, I love it. I love what we got, like, pieces wise in The Rise of Skywalker, but I think a 3-hour cut would have made it so much better because I think that as corporate slime as it can feel quite often, they still did some it's still one of the most creative, crazy corporate things I've ever seen. Like, if you were I saw a tweet today, it's like, yeah, it's all the excesses of Disney's corporate, like, holdover and Iger's hand holding of Star Wars and kind of wrangling of it at the end of the sequels, but it is a film where Rey literally heals a big snake and a ghoulish Palpatine has, like, a whole planet of, like, killer Star Destroyer. Like, it's some crazy, like, playground stuff that I think would have worked a lot better and been a more proper Dark Empire if it had 3 hours, right? I don't know. That's always been the one I've clamored for the most. I wouldn't mind seeing the one cutscene from Echo Base of the Wampas and the Wampa attack. I think that would've been cool just to see, like, 3PO kinda get his, like, a little bit of respect there, even if he's gonna still be chastised and mocked by everyone through the asteroid field throughout the rest of the film and blown apart. Just him doing that, I think would've been cool. I love the way his hand, like, rips it off. It's just such a sudden jerk off of the little label of the Wampas, and then you see stormtroopers knock, hit the button, and then you just see a claw come out, pull them back. I don't know if we have to see, like, multiple Wampas in the base, but at least just that scene I think would have been great to have put in episode 5. Though I can see why. It's pretty non-essential. It's more of a humorous bit more than anything. Man, I don't know if there's anything else I really would wanna see. If we were talking about, like, a special edition, I would have been very interested in seeing what Lord and Miller did with their version of Solo. I know Dryden Voss would have also been different. I think it would have been I forget the guy's name. He passed away, unfortunately, but he was from The Wire, and he was supposed to be like more like a lion-esque Dryden Voss as opposed to a human. I would have loved to seen that. I would love to see what the humor would have been like, but yeah, I don't know if there's anything else. I think it's really just Revenge of the Sith just because I love that film, and Rise of Skywalker because I think there's a much better film with all the stuff that was hinted at that was filmed that was never actually shown.
Well, I think this is going to be our last question unless we get a super chat between now and the end of the stream. So if you want one last question on the stream, send in a super chat, helps us out a lot. The Mandalorian fan channel says, "Do you think Grand Admiral Thrawn will die in Ahsoka season 2 or survive and appear in Dave Filoni's new movie?" I don't think there's really any chance of. I won't say any chance. I'll give him like a 5% chance of dying. I would be very disappointed personally if he dies. Like, I don't think they can do anything in Ahsoka season 2 that will make it worth the wait of finding out what happened to Thrawn after Rebels and then he dies in that show. I do think that would be incredibly disappointing. So I'm expecting Ahsoka season 2. My personal hope was originally, before we got the like concept art trailer from Celebration, was that there was almost no Thrawn in this season, that he was purely saved for whatever they had in the future, and they were just focusing on the character whose name is leading the show. That's Ahsoka. But it seems like this show is going to be even more expansive than last season, which I'm a little concerned about. It's going to have even more stuff with Ahsoka and Sabine. It's going to have more stuff with Hera. It's going to be more divided than ever, obviously, because we're back once again with like our characters being in different parts of the galaxy, different galaxies altogether. But I don't really think they should kill. They shouldn't kill Thrawn. Will he die? I'll give it like a less than 5% chance, but I don't think they should. I think he's a big enough name, even with the way people don't like him in season 1. He's a big enough name to possibly lead a film as a villain. If you redeem him in this season and make him even, much scarier and much more intense and much more like the Thrawn we've seen in Legends before, now that he has all his resources, now that he's back in the main galaxy, now that he's got the Shadow Council or whatever united, now that he's got his Dathomirian army, all those things, if you bring him back and you have him scarier than ever and get people hyped to see more Thrawn, you should definitely not kill him this season. It would be a very Disney Plus move to do so, but I hope and pray they don't. That has, to be honest, Mandalorian fan channel, it hasn't even crossed my mind that they would do that. And now that you said that, I'm slightly worried that if they did, like, I would just kind of be all out on Dave Filoni's movie. I'm sorry, I don't care what it is. It's been supposed to be this Thrawn movie. If they killed Thrawn and they were like, we're just gonna do something else because this show isn't working, I would be out. I would be very disappointed that that's how they wasted Thrawn in canon.
Yeah, it's a non-zero chance, which is already worrying enough that it actually is registering. But I mean, I guess that's just how math works here, right? But no, I don't think so. I really highly doubt it. I think I think we can see Thrawn take a significant setback while also setting up some significant, power plays against the New Republic. That's how I look at it. Because I know we've been hearing a little bit more about like Ezra is going to be a big role, and I think if we never truly get, um, I guess we never truly get like a book from Timothy Zahn about like the misadventures of Ezra and Thrawn as they had to like cohabitate Peridia together. I think we could see, like, him as a Hera and him go after the Dathomirians, the grandmothers, do some operations around there. I think we can see them take a big victory against Thrawn initially, and then maybe, like, it's revealed that, like, it was all just a big bait and ploy, that maybe Thrawn not there, that he was actually sacrificing one of the Shadow Council because that was, 1, necessary, 2, because that guy was soft or something and was, like, almost willing to play for the highest bidder. I'd love to see him have some interplay with the Shadow Council, in the season. I think there's been rumors too with Mandalorian Grogu that they're gonna have more than just that one Shadow Council member. There's been some casting rumors about multiple, so maybe we're gonna see more than just a meeting, but different power plays and stuff like that. So I think Thrawn has a chance actually of even cameoing in Mandalorian Grogu, honestly. So yeah, in my mind, I say no. I think there's a chance, but I think it's more gonna just set the scale of like what the conflict's gonna start off with in TVs, just to let us have an understanding of the underworld and stuff like that, understanding of the staging grounds that are gonna be in play, and then the movies will actually handle the more classic Thronisms. I think we're still gonna see him take a loss, but it's gonna be like a scheduled loss, like a lot of Heir to the Empires, that he doesn't get everything exactly how he wants it, but he still gets enough to chip away to that big, big hit that he's gonna take. And I think that's gonna happen. I really do think it's gonna happen. I think if we see a Thrawn in this series that in the second season lose, I still think he'll get like a very Heir to the Empire closing victory, like the subterfuge against like Akbar and like setting up stuff for like the New Republic's gonna be infighting and not taking him seriously, or like maybe the first centrist slash first future first order worlds like making like a hey, like we kind of want to go with this guy. Like he knows what he's doing. He's a military genius, blah blah blah. I think we can start seeing stuff like that be built out. But him dying, no, I don't know. I mean, it just seems too crazy. And then the fact that they're saying Akbar is going to play a big role in this season only seems to me like they're going to have multiple battles. So why not do one cool battle here on TV and then do more in the movies where you're going to actually have Thrawn actually take a couple of wins, as opposed to like the TV shows where you can be like, he's missing a little bit here, he's losing a little bit there. So no, I don't think that's going to happen. Um, I don't know if I think Skywalker's Canyon probably closer. Dave's third movie. I'm assuming like third Mandalorian Grogu film or something. I think that might become Dave's film. Grogu's not gonna die in the Mandalorian Grogu. If that happens, I think you not only what was like Liam saying, like I'm out on an Heir to the Empire film. I think you're out on like all the Mandoverse fans if he dies in the first movie appears. So I think that's more like said in jest. I'm hoping, but I think we'll see some significant developments for him and Din Djarin, but I don't think it'll be like a hey, like this fun adventure actually turns out to be a tragic ending for our most popular cutesy character in all of Star Wars.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, that would be. I think that's a less than zero. Kill Grogu. Um, but yeah, Thrawn. I'm out completely if they kill Thrawn. And I also don't want him to lose. Honestly, like that's where Ahsoka season 2 is so weird because it's like the way they've set it up. You kind of, if he is the main villain, he's got to lose. I think you substitute him losing with Balin losing and maybe kind of making Balin the one that has the arc where he loses, but then Thrawn is the other villain who's like gaining power, because he technically wins in season 1, right? Thrawn, as much as he loses the battle but not the war, he it's not like a decisive classic Thrawn victory, especially for a first live action time seeing Thrawn in battle. Uh, I know we all wanted more, even if I don't hate the portrayal nearly as much as other people. I did want more out of it, but you can't have him lose twice in a row, 2 seasons in a row, and then you go into a movie and you're like, okay, well, he was already beat by Ahsoka and Ezra and Sabine. And what is he going to do with the rest of the New Republic? What's he going to do when he comes up against Luke Skywalker? Like he has to have some victories. So I imagine that the end of season 2 ends with Thrawn decimating the New Republic in a battle. And their big hope is that Ahsoka has returned with some new power or whatever, and kind of maybe connects with Luke in order to figure out a way to defeat Thrawn. I think having the Dathomiri and like the undead stormtrooper as like kind of the new clones of Heir to the Empire. I think that's an interesting twist that definitely is a lot more difficult to deal with than just a clone army. So we'll see how that all plays in. But I do think this season needs to do the two things of setting up Ahsoka to be a much more interesting character and also setting up Thrawn to be a very intimidating villain. If Thrawn isn't intimidating by the end of the season, if he loses again, I just don't think that's the way you do it. It would it would be he kind of needs a decisive victory like he has at the end of Rebels season 3. People forget when they talk about Thrawn
That
how
one was
menacing he
huge.
is in season
Yeah.
3 because he wins pretty much every time in season 3 of Rebels. And people mostly just talk about season 4, which he
Yeah.
also, wins pretty much every time, except for when Purrgil attach themselves to his ship. So
How do you
uh,
count for them? Like, come on.
yeah, so I do think I think they will get it closer to the Thrawn we all want. That's the end of our show this week, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. Make sure you join us again next week. Hopefully, we'll have some more news to talk about next week. Make sure you check out all the other content coming out on the channel. Like I said at the beginning of the stream, Visions was up this week. So we had a reaction to the first 3 episodes. We talked a little bit more in depth about those 3 that came out last week, whenever the episodes came out. I think it was Wednesday. And then we just put up yesterday our full review of the whole series plus our episode rankings. So if you want to hear us talk a little bit about each episode and let you know where we would rank each one, that went up yesterday. We also have a review for The Last Order, which came out about 2 weeks ago, coming up. And then the Master of Evil book is coming out next week. We're working on getting through that book so we can get you a review out by the time it comes out. So you all can hear our thoughts. That's the latest book from Adam Christopher about Darth Vader. So very excited to finish that one. I'm enjoying my reads so far through that. So keep an eye out on the channel for all of that content as well as other content. We're still continuing with the Fan Question of the Week program. So again, joining us on these streams, asking your questions, you have a shot of being featured on a video. So make sure you do so. It really helps out the whole function of the channel. You get to be promoted on your own video. Shorts are continuing to come out as well. Still polls every week too. Thanks so much for watching the stream this week, everybody, and we will see you all